Well, hello. My name is Cammie, and I am 37 years old. I wanted to start a podcast, so I don't even know who's going to be listening to this, to be quite honest. I have been wanting to do this for quite some time, and kind of just want to, talk about what it's like being a mom to an autistic child, as well as realizing along the way that I'm also autistic and have ADHD. I never did get diagnosed when I was younger because it was just not something that was typically done, especially with girls. But I wanted to kind of start a podcast and kind of talk about my experience about what it's like being a parent that's having to not only navigate the world for her child, but also for herself, and the struggles and the challenges, but also the wins and just everyday life and how it goes. I have been encouraged by so many of my friends who have told me that I should speak up and I should talk about this, and that I have something worth saying. And while there is a part of my brain that tells me that what I have to say is important, there are definitely those brain gremlins that are fighting against that, telling me that nobody wants to listen and nobody cares what I have to say. And I finally just got to a point where I decided that whether anybody listens to this or not, I'm going to do this. So here we go. So like I said, my name is Cammie, and I'm 37 years old, and I have an autistic daughter. And for ease of being able to share my life without giving too many specific details, we will call her Z. She is 8 years old. She was diagnosed. So I guess let's go back to the beginning. I had her in end of 2016, and it wasn't too bad of a pregnancy. I felt somewhat normal, but being my first pregnancy, it's what I knew, so I didn't really know any different. I'd spent a lot of time in my life being around pregnant women, especially the fact that I worked in daycares and nurseries and babysat for the longest time. I think I started babysitting when I was 10. And being around a plethora of different kids, and a plethora of pregnant women that had no problem sharing with me, which I did appreciate, a lot of the ins and outs of pregnancy. So my pregnancy seemed kind of normal, little swollen here and there, nothing crazy, but it had a few complications, and I think as I'm kind of going through this, I think I'll save that for another episode where I talk about just the pregnancy and the experience with having her. But long story short on that is I ended up having an emergency C-section with her. She is fine and healthy, whatnot. And development-wise, she seemed to be doing well after she was born. We'll talk about all of that experience later. So I want to say it was around 15 months or 18 months. I can't remember when I started noticing some oddball things And I say oddball things like just developmentally just seemed a bit delayed. And it's not like I wasn't around kids. It's not like I was only around friends that had kids. There was a lot of, I grew up and I say grew up, I grew up in childcare and nursery and Mother's Day Out programs, but I also worked in them for a long time. So I was very used to seeing the typical growth charts and development of kids along the way. And so I just noticed a couple of different oddball things. And I think it was at her 2-year appointment. I remember having a conversation with my mom sitting on the couch, and she was talking to me about like just some of her development and how she seemed like it was just a little bit delayed. And I told her, I was like, well, I said, that could just be who she is, maybe she'll just catch up later. I said, but I am going to talk to her pediatrician about it. So I didn't realize how much she was delayed until you go to fill out those questionnaires about like the development of your child when you go to those certain checkups, right? And it was her 2-year checkup, and I'm filling out the questionnaire, and it's talking about like, how many words does she say? What is she, is she sitting up? Is she walking? All those typical developments, right? And I remember getting to the specific question of how many words. And so there's a lot of questions and you fill this questionnaire out, or at least with our pediatrician's office, you fill the question out before you see the pediatrician. So I fill it out as best I can, but there were quite a few questions that I didn't answer because I just was kind of unsure of how the question was being asked, and I didn't feel like I was just confused. So pediatrician comes in and we talk, and she's asking me about Z's development and, how many words does she say? And I'm like, well, I said, I said, she doesn't really say a lot, and I was trying to count on my hand how many words she said, and I could barely get to 5, and that was with sign language. I was like, she can sign a few words, and they were like, well, that's great, but we're not counting the sign language words. We need to count actual words that she's verbally saying. I'm like, well, I could barely count to 5, and the typical mama, dada, eat were there, but looking back, I can barely remember the words because it really just wasn't a lot. And I think I even stretched myself in trying to get her up to saying that she was saying 5 words. So there was that. There was, does she respond to her name? And I said, not really. And just several questions. And she's like, well, she seems a bit delayed because at this age in development, she should be saying about 50 words. So I'm like, wow. She's not even, she's barely making a 10% of her development. I'm like, this is crazy. So pediatrician, love her to death. She gave me a referral for a government program that will test for speech, and also gave me a referral for a hearing and an eye doctor, because we wanted to make sure that she could hear and see properly, since she wasn't actually responding to those things. So I go and do that, and that appointment was at the end of the year, and I think I got those referrals and actually got those appointments done within a month, so I was within a month, a couple weeks maybe, I was on it, got her seen by a therapist with this government program to kind of test her all around, including speech. And then we had her hearing tested and we had her vision tested. And her vision tested at perfect for her age, and her hearing tested perfect for her age. It was a really cool thing with the hearing is that they just send the sound waves in her, because I was like, she's not going to respond to you. So how do you know if she's hearing anything? And so they're like, no, we send the sound waves in and they bounce back, and the frequency and that they bounce back tells us what her hearing's like. I'm like, oh, okay. All the cool tricks, right? Vision came back 100% what it should be. Hearing came back as what it should be. So they go to do, I find out that it's with the government the program that they sent it, because when they're under a certain age, it's the government assisted program that comes in, and then when you get to 3 years old, then you actually go into the school system getting tested by them. Or at the time I didn't realize what was being tested, so it was just observations. I was like, okay. So at the time I thought it was a speech therapist that was coming in to test her, and if I remember correctly, it was someone who has done speech and occupational type therapy and whatnot. So they go in, they view her. Now she's 2 years old, so they're viewing her in her typical normal setting, right? And they are asking her questions. They are putting toys out. They're seeing how she interacts. They're calling her name. They're putting things in front of her to see like how she responds visually, because everything else came back that it was perfect hearing, perfect vision. And then they go through and they're like, hey, this is just a typical questionnaire to test for autism. Doesn't mean that she has it. It's just something that we do. It's routine. I was like, okay. And they do the test, which the test is basically me as her parent answering a whole bunch of questions. So I'm like, well, I feel like this is normal. I feel like this is normal, because it was normal in my household and it was normal for me. So I didn't feel like a lot of these things were abnormal. Playing with friends, not playing with friends, putting things in her mouth, not putting things in her mouth. Covering her face with, depending on lights, covering her ears. I didn't think that any of that was abnormal, right? Because it was things that I did, and it was things that were done by other people in my family. And so I didn't necessarily think any of it was odd. So that first questionnaire when she was 2 was very much do you think this is odd or not? And I was like, I don't think it's odd. So she's like, no, she doesn't look like she has autism according to this test. I'm like, okay. But she does need speech therapy. So we get a speech therapist, and I sit in there for a few of the sessions, and then I kind of let her be for a couple of the other ones, because I don't want to be overbearing, and I don't want to be a distraction. So the speech therapist is great. And she was 2 at the time. She was going to a preschool that was connected with my work, so it was great. I could literally go to work and she was there on site, but there was a preschool there. So the speech therapist is like, I want to do a few other things. I want to kind of see how she interacts with other kids, that whole routine. She goes and works on trying to just initially just get her to speak. And she tells me, she's like, she's learning words when it comes to sign language, but she's learning words when it comes to music. She's like, as soon as I put music to words, basically, she was picking up on them very, very well. And then it was repetitive over and over and over and over. And as a mom who has rarely ever heard her kid speak, I was ecstatic. I remember I remember us walking in our yard, and she went to the gate and wanted it opened, and she did the sign. Not only did she do the sign for open, but she said the word, and that was huge. That was huge because I'd never heard her say a word without being prompted. And I of course got my phone out immediately and started recording it, because that's just, it was amazing. It literally, it was like, I couldn't put words to how I was feeling. I was so overjoyed with the fact that she was able to actually say a word without being told to say a word, without being prompted. She did. It was the very first time I had ever heard her say a word on her own. You know, you didn't put anything in front of her to say, okay, what is this? Or, you know, what, who am I? What's this toy over here? Or putting song to it so that she would recognize it, right? It was all on her own, and it was the word open, and she did the motion for it. It was just amazing. Obviously, I get a little teared up when I think about that, because it's just a special moment. So the speech therapist had worked with her from January to, I want to say, a few months before she came to me, and she was like, I think she needs occupational therapy. There's a lot of things behavioral wise that it seems like she might need an occupational therapist. And I said, okay. So I got the recommendation, and I got her being seen by an occupational therapist a few times a week, as well as a speech therapist a few times a week. And then the speech therapist, after a good month or so of that, as Z is developing and she is speaking more and she is communicating, or I should say we are understanding her communication more. As she's doing that, more things are being noticed. She is covering her ears a lot. She is running away and hiding. And I say like straight up eloping. She's having a hard time transitioning from one activity to the next. She has a hard time giving up certain items. She has a hard time watching somebody play with a toy or of some sort differently than how she would. She didn't play with the toys in quote unquote what the world would consider a normal way, right? Like, for instance, when she was playing with any type of cars or whatnot, she wasn't racing the cars. She wasn't she wasn't having them drive around, right? She was trying to dissect them. Everything that she came in contact with, immediately it went to her mouth, and she wasn't eating it, but you could tell. It was almost like I'm looking at her through this experience, and I'm like, she's trying to figure out what this item is. Not is it edible? She's trying to figure out what it is, just in general. And then on top of that, I should add that ever since she was roughly a few weeks old, immediately she would cling to having a blanket in her mouth. And, of course, everybody's telling me that's a hazard. She's going to choke. She's going to hurt herself. All that. And, of course, I know that it's probably not the safest thing for her to put a blanket in her mouth and chew on it. But she wasn't trying to eat it. And I noticed literally it was almost like if she had a pacifier in her mouth, right? But she wasn't huge on pacifiers. She tolerated them. She's like, whatever. But it wasn't like if she had a blanket, that's what she was going for. And she would chew on it to do anything, to calm down, to fall asleep, to transition, when she was just trying to just sit there watching TV every time. Like, her babysitters, her caregivers growing up, her teachers, all of them can say there was always a blanket in her mouth. So we always had plethora of blankets, and we still to this day. But back to the speech therapist. After she had started receiving occupational therapy along with her speech therapist, the speech therapist came to me in my office in the most loving and concerning and gentle ways. And she knew, I could tell that she was trying to approach me with gentleness, with concern, but also did not want to overstep, because she is providing a service. And I could tell, obviously, now she had to be very careful with what she said and how she said things, because not only is this part of her employment, but parents can get just very sensitive about what you say about their kid. And honestly, these kind of conversations can go either way. So she sits down with me and she's like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. She's like, I want you to know that I love Z, and I'm saying this because of my experience, not because I'm a doctor. I need you to know I am not a doctor. I'm a speech therapist, but I've worked with a lot of other kids that are very similar to Z. And so I was like, okay. And so, and I should add that she was definitely more of a grandmother type figure. And I chose that. You had to, at the beginning, you got to pick a few of them, and they tried to get you the therapist that you wanted. And I picked her not only because of her credentials. She seemed like she'd been doing this for a long time, but she also seemed, from her bio, so you can only get so much, that she seemed to be more of a grandmother that would push the limits, but also have that loving grandmother aspect to her. So anyway, so she sat with me in my office, and she was like, I am not a doctor, so I can't say this for sure, but she seems to have a lot of the similar attributes as the kids that I work with that have autism. She's like, has that ever been anything on your radar? And I said, they did the assessment in the beginning, but they said that she didn't have it according to that questionnaire. I said, what is it that you think that she has? I said, because I trust you. I trust your opinion. And she went through a couple of the attributes, the whole blanket in the mouth, or not just blanket in the mouth to soothe, but everything going in the mouth to test. And her screaming, and her being very sensitive to sound, her not wanting to be around a lot of people, her not wanting to look anybody in the eye, her not responding to her name very well, her trying to hide away a lot. I can't remember if I said that, but her trying to hide away a lot of her hand motions, a lot of the random sounds that would just come out of her mouth. So a lot of different other attributes, a lot of the repeating exactly what you say and how you say it to a T. And I've come to find out later that it's called echolalia. But her responding heavily to music and whatnot. And so she was just a lot of these different attributes. And she was like, I think it's worth going to have her be seen by a professional to tell you yay or nay. I said, okay. So that was, I want to say that was like April or May, something like that. So yeah, I think it was April, May. So as I get the referral, whatnot, of course, the waiting list is anywhere from they tell you oh, your waiting list could be up to a year or something. And I'm like, and this was pre shutdown COVID 2020 time frame. So I know sometimes the waits after that have been like, 2 years or so. The waits got like crazy once 2020 got here and whatnot. But anyway, so I was like, gosh, 9 months to a year, that's a long time. So I got an appointment with her, but they called me and they're like, hey, we had a cancellation. We have to move up your appointment. I'm like, absolutely, right? So had her observation and whatnot sometime in the fall, and it would have been 17, 18, it was sometime in the fall of 2019. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember the timeline of everything, because she also was about to start preschool again. She was 2, but she was an older 2. She was about to start preschool again, and some of the people that came in, it's kind of like doing an IEP, but it's before you get into the school system because she's so young. So it was kind of a team of speech therapists and whatnot, and they're like, hey, we think that this preschool is not the best one for her. It was a conversation of basically moving her out of the preschool that was connected with my work to a more I would say confined is the best way, and a safer one for her, something that was basically built more for preschool, not more so a daycare center, and which I understood. It was extremely hard to hear that, because it was going to be the first time that she would be separated from me for so long, and you know, as someone who is, we're 2+ years of being with each other every single day, and then when she got into daycares, her not being far from me where I could go see her after like maybe 2 or 3 hours if I wanted to. So doing that to probably not going to see her for bare minimum 8 hours, going 8 hours. So that was hard, but it was what was best for her. Well, in that same process, we were doing the evaluation, and so we got her evaluated, and you go in there, the way it works, or at least it did for us, is you go in there, you meet, as the parent with the child, you meet with the psychiatrist or psychologist, because those are one of the two that can diagnose. Any type of therapist cannot. So we met with the psychiatrist, and she explained how the process would go. We answered, her dad and I answered questionnaires separately, and about her development and how she is and whatnot, and then also gave one to her speech therapist, and then one of the teachers that sees her often, just to get some different POVs, and did that. And then I took Z in for her evaluation, and we did that. And then another appointment, so now we're on appointment 3, another appointment, I want to say it was in October, right before she turned 3. It was in October where we got the diagnosis that she was on the spectrum. And of course, you learn a whole bunch of things in this meeting. They tell you that they don't diagnose Asperger's anymore. They don't diagnose autism like they used to. It's now all a spectrum. And I'm like, okay, still learning all of this and getting so much information. Here are the resources to help you. Here's some here's some resources that you can reach out to that would help you financially or that help you with a support system. All of that, plus this huge packet of here are the results of her assessment. And I didn't know as much about autism as her dad did at the time. And we're sitting there and getting this information, and I remember him we knew enough that we knew it was a disability. But we're sitting there and he asked the question, and I just was kind of dumbfounded by it. Asked the question, is this something to where she won't be able to live on her own as she gets older? She'll have to always live with someone, and of course the doctor's like, we don't know, she's so young, we don't know how she's going to develop. It's a possibility, but we don't know. And I remember sitting there, and I think that was the realization, or the kind of the moment where I was like, I don't know enough about this. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I don't know enough about this autism to even think that would have been a question. So I started digging and doing my research and wanting to know more and getting more educated, and it was slow at first. I'll be honest, it was slow at first, but as she's gotten older, it's not just reading books about autism. It's also reading other people's experiences with being autistic themselves, with growing up being diagnosed, growing up not being diagnosed, reading some POVs from children, and I would say like they're children, but like the teenagers or young adults, reading books from parents that are raising autistic children, trying to do research not only on the medical side of things, but on the societal aspect and the emotional aspect. And I remember getting that diagnosis, and there was no shame in it. I didn't think of anything because, the doctor said something really important that I think I would tell every parent that gets that diagnosis from their doctor for their child. And it was that Z is the same child she was before as she is now. Nothing has changed about her. You're just realizing something about her now. We're just discovering more and we're discovering more about her. Nothing has changed. She hasn't changed. She was the same yesterday as she is today. Nothing about her changed, right? And I remember hearing that, and I'm like, okay, so she's always been autistic. We just realized it now. And that was huge for me. That was huge. Figuring that out, realizing that this wasn't something that she caught. It wasn't anything that she developed. She's always been this way. And we're just now figuring it out at that point. So I remember driving home. It was a long drive home. I can't remember if I drove. No, I think I drove. Drove home, drove to work, one of the two. I drove to work. That's what it was. I drove to work. And she, I remember calling my mom on the way back, because it was quite the drive, and told her, hey, because I'd been keeping her updated on the process, and told her that, hey, we got the diagnosis with the meeting, and she is autistic. She has autism. And my mom told me, she's like, okay, well, what does that mean? I said, it means that we figure things out. And it'll be okay. It'll be okay. She's no different than she was yesterday. And we'll figure things out as we go. I don't know. We just know that's... I used to say it's what she has, right? I used to say that it was something that she has, and my verbiage will kind of go in and out as the years go on, and but yeah, I called my mom and told her, and then I remember telling 2 friends of mine at the time. I'm still friends with them. I'm actually one of them. Anyways, that's a whole other story. But I remember telling in a group message to my friends and about the diagnosis and whatnot, and the results and everything, and one of them texted back, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I sat there for a second, and I'm like, but I'm not. And I think I responded to something along those lines of, no, that, actually it's okay. Like, this is who she is, so it's okay. And the other friend texted me privately and was just like, I'm sorry that she said that, because we don't need to be sorry about who Z is. This is who she is. And that's kind of how I felt about it. Then I remember going to church the following Sunday, because I can't remember what day it was of the week. I remember going to church the following Sunday, and I told 2 people. I told a couple of people, but I was standing with 2 people telling them after I dropped Z off in the nursery. And I told them, yeah, we got a diagnosis. She's been diagnosed autistic. She's autism. And one of the ladies looked at me and she said, well, are you sure? And I was like, well, yeah. And she was like, she got diagnosed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. She was like, well, are you going to go get a second opinion? And the amount of rage that I controlled at that point, I mean, give me a pat on the back, because the audacity that this woman had and has to ask me if I was going to get another opinion, like I had just went and done this evaluation on a whim, was mind-boggling and just infuriating. Because I'm like, you don't know what I've been through the past year of figuring all this out. You don't know what I've been through the past, now at this point, 3 years, because she got diagnosed right before her 3rd birthday. And I was like, you don't know what I've been through the past 3 years of navigating through all this, and the intense past year. And you want to go ahead and ask me if I'm going to get a second opinion? Why? Why? And I was like, no, I'm not going to get a second opinion, because this is kind of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th opinion. I said, she's been seen by several doctors. She's been seen by several therapists and evaluated. This is not the first opinion. So no, I'm not going to go get, quote unquote, a second opinion. And then she's like, she doesn't look autistic. And I don't remember what I said. I do remember very much holding back so much rage, because I was in church and I didn't want to cause a scene. And I was very much like, oh, I need to make sure that I behave because I'm a woman and I need to make sure that I don't act out, right? The amount of rage though when she said that was, I had to take a moment and walk away. And I was like, I truly can't remember actually what I said when she said, oh, she doesn't look autistic. I was like, I think I just said well, she is. And then just I think quickly walked away. When people say like, I don't remember how I responded because they were in so much shock, that was a moment like that. I don't remember how I responded because I was in so much shock of someone saying that, well, she doesn't look autistic. And so I remember walking away. I remember walking away. But yeah, we'll get into some more of the audacity of people, but those are for some other days and topics and whatnot. But yeah, that was kind of the journey of figuring things out that year, and it was a lot to process. It's still a lot to process, but I'm going through somewhat of a more developed chapter in this whole thing, and I'm happy to share my experience, to share how I'm navigating this, and how she's navigating this, because she's going to be an adult one day and she's going to have to tell her story, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say and how she has to say it. And I can tell you right now, I don't know what all she'll say. I know I'm not a perfect mom, but I do hope that she knows how much I love her, and how much I'm trying my absolute best. I'm trying my absolute best to do what's best for her, what's best for us, for her development, for her growth, not just with her autism, but also just her as a person. Her growing up to be the person that she should be, to the best of her ability. So, yeah. That is where we're at. That was how the first year kind of went in a nutshell. And, yeah. I've rambled on for 43 plus minutes and didn't even realize it. I honestly thought that I wouldn't have anything really to talk about, and that it would just be kind of a blah kind of an episode, but here we are. So yeah, I hope you come along for the journey of how this is going to go, how this podcast thing goes, and I hope it goes well. So, okay. Well, that's for that, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye, everybody.